Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
But we'll begin with a story altogether closer to home. A story of Her Majesty the Queen, the Prime Minister, various other dignitaries, all, I was about to say chilling. I'm 44 years old. I say all chilling at Buckingham Palace. They were certainly not chilling. What were they doing? I don't know. Schmoozing. But the Prime Minister was caught on microphone, I would have thought quite indiscreetly, describing Afghanistan and Nigeria as fantastically corrupt. Strange word to use, fantastically, but I'm teasing you a little bit when I suggest we should probably read more into it than a temporary choice of word. Fantastic is a positive. Fantastically corrupt. It kind of means wonderfully corrupt. But it's also a quantifier. It's not just quality that it describes, is it? It also, of course, describes quantity. So it could just mean a fantastic amount of corruption. And we'll probably give him the benefit of the doubt on that. If you're Nigerian or Afghan, just give me a quick heads up on how you feel. If you're neither, you're equally welcome to chip in. I'm interested in how corrupt we are in this country. I bored you rigid many moons ago when we first started talking about this sort of thing with a tale that I thought was amazing. I was such a naive, untravelled soul in my early 20s. I started spending an awful lot of time in Greece, driving around with a good friend, and he was pulled over by the police. And I said, have you got your licence with you? He says, I don't have I won't do his accent. He says, I don't have a driving licence. I said, what? I started getting really nervous. What do you mean you don't have a driving licence? I never took my test. I said, you've been driving me around Crete all summer, you criminal. And he just gave some drachma to the police officer. And everyone went on their way. And I sat there. I thought I'd witnessed something like, I don't know what I'd witnessed. I thought I'd witnessed something epic. I thought I'd witnessed something absolutely incredible. I honestly thought I was looking over my shoulder for the rest of the day, thinking, oh, my Lord, I'm going to end up in a Greek jail by tea time. And as far as I know, they're probably a bit like Turkish jails. And I'd seen Midnight Express quite recently. I thought I was going to have to bite out the guard's tongue with my own teeth in order to restore a little bit of liberty. But it was nothing like that. And I told other people, Greek friends, and they were like, yeah. Siga, siga. Etsi, ketsi. It's the way we do things, it's the way it goes. And then you sort of tell that story to other people and they say, oh, that's nothing. When I was in Morocco or when I was in... And now you worry that if I accidentally throw in a country that doesn't have backsheesh and kickbacks as part of its culture, I'm going to cause even more offence than the Prime Minister has caused. I'm told, and I have it on impeccable authority, that the current Nigerian regime is dedicated to wiping out corruption. The current president was very much elected on that ticket. But here's a phrase you're only ever going to hear me say once, all right? There's a brilliant short story by Jeffrey Archer. I kid you not. And it involves an African leader who has achieved the premiership by campaigning very passionately against corruption. And it's a long, long time since I read it. But he ends up in the office of a really hardcore Swiss banker. Right? He ends up in the office of the Swiss banker who has a reputation for really being the banker of choice for the most corrupt potentates on the planet. You know, you're a dictator, rifling money from your own people. This is the banker you go to in Switzerland. And somehow this newly elected anti-corruption campaigner and president arrives in the office of the Swiss banker and he exerts epic pressure on him to cough, to spill the beans. I want to know where the money's gone, where my predecessor's money's gone. And I think he pulls a gun on him. It's in A Quiver Full of Arrows, Archer's very early book of short stories. I think he pulls a gun on him or something like that. And still the banker refuses to provide any details to this wonderful, squeaky clean anti-corruption politician. He's got a gun at his head and he's going, no, I'm not giving you anything. And at that point, the guy puts his gun away and says, excellent news. In that case, I'd like to deposit £200 million in this large bag of diamonds. And I love that payoff. It's a great payoff. It's a definition of a good short story, a real twist in the tale that I, for one, didn't see coming. But then you sort of find yourself talking to people in this country. And I'm going to choose my words carefully, i.e. I'm not going to provide any identifiable information. But I do hear quite a lot of slightly worrying stories about planning applications in particular. A lot of people are persuaded that planning applications can often involve a degree of sleight of hand, perhaps, whether it's just hospitality or actual cash The old brown envelopes? I do not know. If you're going to tell me stories like that, you too need to observe very carefully the rules of libel and law. It's corruption, though. And then you talk to my esteemed contributor Bill Browder, the man who pretty much leads the world in pursuit of Putin's cronies' filthy money. And he will provide you with chapter and verse on how much of it ends up here. So you could turn up here in London with 100 million quid that you'd rifled out of a previously state-owned utility in Russia. You could buy a flat in Belgravia and cover every piece of wall in Old Masters by tea time without anybody asking you where that money has come from. That's corruption, right? I was in Southeast Asia not long ago, and an Australian fella had built the hotel we were staying in. He had a Thai wife. And he told me that there was absolutely no way they could have laid a single brick without bribes. I didn't go into too much detail because it wasn't the conversation we were having at the time. But there's no way he could have done anything without bribes. And it wasn't even said with a sense of fury or even resignation, because resignation would involve yeah, it's tough, but there we go. It wasn't even like that. It was just, it was as normal as putting milk on your cornflakes. It was as normal as well, just insert anything that's normal for you into that phrase there. And it was, of course you've got to pay off them, and then you've got to pay off them, and they need to pay off too. And then you've got to do this and do that. And you sort of thought, okay, well, that's normal then as well. But it's still corruption. I don't really have a question for you. I haven't asked one yet, and yet every phone line's already ringing. I don't know what this means. What does this mean? Are we giving out the wrong number? Are people phoning up to order food? Apparently not. So I guess let's just praise you then. We've asked how you feel about this slur upon Nigeria and Afghanistan. What is corruption like in other countries? Have you ever come across it? And I am going to ask you whether or not you think the Prime Minister is a hypocrite. There's another story today about the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority discovering that relations employed by MPs earn about $5,500 more than other employees on average. And they've seen their salaries rise at double the standard rate. That's corruption, right? I don't think it's illegal. But if you've got two people working at the House of Commons, one is working for an MP to whom they're not related, one is working for an MP to whom they are related, either by marriage or birth, then the second, the latter category, is on average going to be earning $5,500 more than the person who's not related to the MP. I'm a bit boring on the question of whether or not MPs should be allowed to employ relatives, because if you know any MPs, you'll realise that when the wife or the husband is the PA of the parliamentarian, they really are on duty 24 hours a day. So I'm not as scorched earth as some on that question, but I certainly don't think they should be getting paid more than anyone else is. That's corruption, right? The expenses scandal, when MPs were expecting you to pay for their duck house or me to pay for their moat cleaning, that was not illegal, but it was still corruption. In my mind, it was moral corruption. The Prime Minister is not referring to moral corruption, is he? He's referring to legal corruption. But I'd like to walk that tightrope as well. So, what do you think of his comments? Fantastically corrupt. Still seems an odd adjective. What do you think of the Prime Minister's comments? Do you want to hear them? I don't know. Can we make them out on this tape? Can you hear them? Well, let's find out.
We've had a very successful cabinet meeting this morning. We talked about our anti-corruption summit. We've got the Nigerians. We've got some leaders of some fantastically corrupt countries coming to Britain. No, Nigeria and Afghanistan, possibly the two most corrupt countries. But this particular...
I don't like the way he talks to the Queen. I really don't. It's almost as if he's kind of... I don't know, humouring, oh yes, it could just be me, that. I think the fact that she keeps her counsel 99.9% of the time is spectacular, because this is the horror that happens when she doesn't. She makes some comments about the Chinese officials at the last state visit being incredibly rude. And do you know what they've done in China? They've blacked it out. The BBC World Report goes out in China, and they've actually blacked out the bits where the Queen... That's quite a timely observation. That's what happens when governments start seeking to control state broadcasters. They actually, it's the censor's pen comes fast upon the decision to intervene. But there you go. I'm just waffling now, and the phones are ringing off the hook. Christina's in Harlesden. Christina, quick, interrupt me before I bore everybody to death.
Hi, James.
Hello, Christina.
Hiya. I'm yet again disappointed with David Cameron, because, first of all, the difference between Nigerians and the British is that at least Nigerians know their society is corrupt. The Brits just make it legal. You know, I know, we'll make it legal, and then it doesn't seem so corrupt. This is what, a couple of weeks after Panama?
Yes.
You know? And let's not forget that Great Britain, in quote, has made money, it would only be great if not for their fantastically corrupt way of getting money. Needless, should we say slavery? Oh, I don't know.
You can. I mean, you can if you want. And in terms of some sort of moral offence, obviously slavery is at the very, very top of the list. Only relatively recently would it become a legal offence on the same scale. But that's not what he means. What he means is a country where you can't get a passport or a building permit without throwing someone a few quid. And Britain is not like that.
Yes, we're fully aware of that, but they're corrupt in other ways. It's just as simple as that. But corruption is corruption is corruption. We can't say, oh, well, we're corrupt in this way, but we're not corrupt.
I think you can, because what this summit is designed to do is to address certain types of corruption. It's not designed to address the types that you described, the legal types, the things that feel a bit wrong. And I'll use the MP's expenses, and the Panama Papers are a good example as well. I hadn't thought of that one. Well done. But it's not the same as an ordinary punter not being able to dig a hole in his back garden unless he throws a few quid to the local government operative, is it? It's just not the same. Go on.
James, how many times have the British society allowed people with money to get away with things that the normal punter wouldn't get away with?
All right, no, it's a great point. You kick us off. No, I like it. It's a good start. And you're sounding very sensible, actually, probably more sensible than I was. Are you of Nigerian extraction?
Yes, I am.
Give me an idea of what corruption looks like in Nigeria, then. There's something that you've encountered or heard about that would never happen here.
Yeah, no. Yes, of course. You do get the, having to, tip someone a little too much to get what you need.
Is that what it's called? A tip, is it? It's called a tip.
It's called a tip. We learned it from the Brits.
And just give me an EG. So if I wanted to what? If I was just doing a normal.
For example, if you need your passport done a little bit quicker, you might little bit more to those in charge to get it done quickly.
You can do that here, but it's official. So it's called a fast track. You can go and stand in Victoria.
Just make it legal.
I did it. I stood in the queue at Victoria and I got my passport much quicker than I would have done if I'd sent it off by post. But the money then goes to the government, which means we all benefit rather than just to the lovely lady behind the counter who was stamping my card. I like it, Christina. I like the use of the phrase hypocritical as well. I really do. 0345 606 0973 is the number you need to grab the phone line that Christina has just vacated. But you need to be quick. I should do that more often. Just start burbling at 10 o'clock and then see if the phones ring or not. Today they've gone nuts already. Corruption. Afghanistan. Corrupt. Nigeria. Fantastically corrupt. Great Britain. Terry's in Greenwich. Terry, what would you like to say?
Hello?
I took you by surprise then, Terry. Temi, sorry. Temi, not Terry, it's Temi. I took you by surprise, A, by getting your name wrong, and B, because you're expecting one of my 5-minute monologues before I get around to taking any calls. No, you're on, you're live, it's over to you.
Thank you, sir. Actually, you know what? I wasn't actually angry before. When David Cameron said, as I said to your producer, I was only ashamed. But, hearing Christian actually more offended now, because that's the problem. We try and live in denial. There's a big, massive problem. And, she's laughing at is in Britain. I don't care about what's in Britain. I'm more concerned about what's happened in Nigeria.
Well, what is happening in Nigeria? Give me a thumbnail sketch.
It is, for example, the police to begin with. There was a time they were trying to do this MOT. Your version for your MOT here?
Yes.
Where you got stopped by MOT. You got stopped by a MOT. They will look for anything defect, even if, and if everything is okay. If everything is okay, you don't pay much. You just pay a handout to the police, and you can go on your merry way. There was over the time a guy had a van. Everything was done. He did every single thing he was supposed to do. But you know what they call him up? He didn't have a bean basket in his in his minivan, because that was one of the things. And obviously, he had to drop a handout to the police as well.
So, is there anywhere in Nigeria that you don't have to? I mean, would you ever have an encounter with the police that didn't involve a bribe?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
But what if you'd committed a really serious crime? Could you just pay your way out of that?
The Probably not, obviously for the big crimes. But this one, you don't overcome any crime. That's why you're paying handouts. Probably because,
So I don't understand why you've got angry at Temi. You said what the Prime Minister said was correct. So what do you feel about him saying it?
I'm not angry at the Prime Minister. I'm angry about Christina.
Oh, the lady on before. What, for saying Britain is quite corrupt as well?
I know Britain is corrupt, but at the end of the day, Britain's corrupt, but you can bring them to account. Can we bring anyone who's been corrupt in Nigeria to account? No, we cannot. Can we disgrace them? No, we cannot. Can we put them in prison? No, we cannot. But at least we can disgrace them here in England. We can print all the corruption in the papers.
Except that in England, if you're a Russian oligarch with a couple of £100 million of ill-gotten gains, we're going to roll out the red carpet for you and hand over half of Knightsbridge.
Yeah, again, I understand that. But the problem is, James, you really don't know how this corruption is actually affecting every single thing. Is in football. There is no part of it's as if you dig up the floor in Nigeria, it's as if corruption will come out. That's how bad it is. There is no aspect. The football is corrupt. Everything is corrupt. It's as if even the air is corrupt. That's how bad it is. You guys were talking about the scam with you were just saying that with the MPs. When we heard about it, we were just laughing at us. So what did they do? Because they put XYZ on the name.
I like this idea that our corruption is somehow enviable. The way we do our corruption is so transparent and out in the open and doesn't really impact that heavily upon what I shall choose to call the little people, a constituency in which I absolutely include myself. Whereas if you were to go to Nigeria, Temi tells us, it would be the little people like us that were feeling the brunt of it on a daily basis. This is fascinating, this, isn't it? It's almost as if David Cameron, every single person who's heard these comments, has heard a different variation. Dean is in Watford. Dean, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello, James. I didn't want to call you, if I'm honest with you.
Why not?
But I didn't... Well...
It's a bit of a rude way to start the flipping call, isn't it, Dean? I didn't want to call you because you've got so many people calling you, and I called you a few times, and I don't want to be that person who's calling all the time, No, but that's very wise. Actually, just say that again. If there's some people listening, they're not necessarily on this show, but they might have still hung around from earlier. just say why you don't think you should ring in too often. Norman in Rickmansworth. Carry on, Dean.
Oh, sorry. I thought you cut me off.
No, of course I haven't cut you off, mate. Go on, you've just displayed a rare bit of self-awareness and indeed an understanding of how phone-in radio works. So what do you want to say? Quick, you've forgotten what the subject is now.
James, the reason why I call you is for some people who are from Afghanistan or from Nigeria to call and say, oh, David Cameron, what said is wrong. I think it's a bit weird because they don't live there. They don't know how it is to have a neighbor who's a police officer, who's a minister or something, and they've got 6, 7, 8, 9 houses, and a hard-working person's got nothing. They don't know how it is. But as you know myself, I am Romanian, and I wish David Cameron would say the same thing about Romania. Do you know that the Prime Minister was charged for the corruption 2 months ago? He lost his job, and now he's got another position as the head of Senate in the country. Half of the government is charged with corruption, but they can't be arrested.
But why? So Romania's pretty rotten. But we've got MPs here who've been in prison. We've got MPs who've resigned in disgrace over bribery allegations and have ended up just recently elected in Wales.
James, you can't compare, James. I left the country because of corruption. I used to serve in armed forces, and I left because I was told who I should vote. What I should vote, I was told I have to pay to keep my job by the armed forces.
Seriously?
Yes.
Good Lord.
I went in the country 2 months ago, and I stopped by the police officer, and I was told, give me £100, and I swear this is true. Give me £100, or I'm going to check around your car. I'm going to find something around your car. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to give you anything, my friend. And he gave me a big, big fine, and that fine went to my mom. Because that's the rules in the country. They're not coming to me in England, where my address is.
So we are allowed. This is why Temi, I've understood better now. Temi was cross with Christina for drawing parallels and calling Cameron hypocritical. Because compared to other countries, for example, your country of origin, Romania, we're pretty squeaky clean. Even though we might be a little bit supine when it comes to particularly Russian kleptocrats, we're not hitting ordinary people every day with unfair and illegal demands. Is that right?
Yes, it is right. And
No,
the
I
people
got
can
it. I got it.
personalise-
Dean, I got to crack on, remember? You just told me how many calls I had waiting. Chelsea's in Edmonton, which is geographically troubling, but nonetheless. Chelsea, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. I'm from Nigerian extraction, and I just wanted to give an example or a couple of examples of what corruption feels like in Nigeria. I mean, I think the main difference is that in Nigeria, it's everywhere. You cannot escape it.
So if I wanted to live a squeaky clean life...
Impossible.
Couldn't do it.
Absolutely impossible. I had a friend who graduated from a medical school a few years ago, and she came over to the UK to do a master's program or a PhD, something of that sort. And she said to me that she feels like she would have to go back and do her whole degree all over again. And she did not have the confidence after doing her master's here to practice as a medical professional back home, because basically all throughout the medical program they've had to pay their way through getting that degree. And this is someone who people will put their lives in, to save them if they had a medical condition. So I mean that's one example. I mean the whole education system is absolutely corrupt. And if you're going to a hospital or to a clinic and you're expecting medical treatment, you better hope that whoever is there knows what they're doing. Another example.
So, hang on a minute. Just slow down a bit. So if I was a fully qualified doctor, and I went back to Nigeria to practice, how would corruption affect me? Why would I not be able to be an excellent doctor?
No. I mean, people who study back in Nigeria, people who actually have medical degrees from Nigeria and come over here to practice.
Might have bought them in Nigeria, might have cut corners in Nigeria to get a medical degree.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's only after she did her master's here that she realised how deficient her qualifications and degree was. I mean, I don't know if she's practicing now because unfortunately I've lost touch with her, but this was about 10 years ago.
What's her name?
I can't say.
Well, I could get you back together. I could reunite you by 11 o'clock this morning. No, don't worry. No, that's fine. I'm troubled by that. I hadn't thought of it that way around. So there's nothing that... I mean, this is when you read stories, and I'm a naive soul, Chelsea, as you're probably aware. I'm a very trusting character. When I read stories about a building collapsing because the contractors involved in building it had used substandard materials in order to save money, and I sit there and think, well, there must be more to it than that. They can't have just killed all these people in order to save a few quid. You go, yep, completely believable, completely normal.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, no, hang on. Let me run this by you quickly because I'm late. I'm going to be late for the news otherwise. Am I allowed to be a bit proud of being British then today? So, although
absolutely,
yeah, there you
absolutely.
go.
I think a lot of people who move from Nigeria, and it's not just an economic, as an economic migrant, people move because they can't just handle the level of corruption as well. So you have people who are successful here, and if they went back home, they would leave, as a king. But when they realize how bad the corruption is and how nothing can get done unless you pay someone a little bribe or whatever, people just say, you know what, I'll just stay here and just live my life as opposed to going back home.
I love it. I spend a lot of time at the moment in this country, it seems. We spend a lot of time putting the boot into the nation. The referendum debate seems to have ramped it up. Everybody's slagging off Britain all the time, on both sides, actually, but I suppose more so on one side than the other. And there you go, something we can be proud of. We're a pretty squeaky country. Fantastically corrupt countries. Is it just me, or did the Prime Minister sound a little envious? And that was a lovely conclusion to the first half hour of this programme there, as we discovered that actually we have quite a lot to be proud of in Britain. In fact, you could argue, when you look at how the Chinese state broadcaster has handled the Queen's indiscreet comments about very rude Chinese officials, you could argue that we've got a hell of a lot more freedoms and powers than perhaps we realise. We're so busy, inevitably, it's not a criticism of anyone, I do it for a living, trying to find fault with the way that we live, trying to find fault with things. But actually, yeah, OK, it's a cause for international shame that we roll out the red carpet for Putin's cronies and kleptocrats. But there are, I suppose, people even in our own political establishment who seem to hold a bit of a torch for Vladimir Putin. It's almost, I guess, the fetishisation of power. And if power is something you fetishise, then you're going to find Putin quite sexy, whoever you are. I find him disgusting because I find morality oddly attractive. But for the ordinary punter in Britain, one of the least corrupt countries on the planet, it may seem. So how do you feel about what the Prime Minister had to say about Nigeria and about Afghanistan? And how do you feel about corruption in general? Tell me what you've witnessed in your countries. An amazing tweet from the incorrigible FCA. He's done business in a lot of countries in the world and just lists the ones where he's had to pay bribes. It's an almost endless list, actually. You might have to send us a list of countries where you didn't have to. Obi is in Purfleet. Obi, what would you like to say?
Hi, yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy with what David Cameron said because it's hopefully going to bring a bit of shame and embarrassment on Nigerian politicians. Because, I mean, the difference between, I suppose, corruption here and corruption in Nigeria is that corruption in Nigeria kills people on a daily basis, through depriving them of basic healthcare needs, other public infrastructure to run their lives and run their businesses. People, there's still power cuts. People can't function normally. So I don't think you can really compare Britain with Nigeria in any way. Politicians here paying family members slightly more. Okay, maybe it's a bit morally dodgy, but it doesn't mean that, roads don't get built and hospitals don't get.
I think you're right. And I'm going to read out a text from someone who says the opposite. You're so blinkered, James. This country is as corrupt as anywhere in the world, whether you're in charge of finding firms for NHS supplies to filtering bids for construction. For example, the Olympic Park, that's a allegation. Certain people earn a nice few quid in backhanders. I'm absolutely confident that they don't. But, of course, even if that were true, which it isn't, it would not be people building public projects with substandard kit and caboodle in order just to trouser the difference themselves. So even if somewhere in Britain you want to build a shopping centre outside town, and it turns out that the council member with responsibility for planning applications enjoyed 2 weeks on your yacht outside Ibiza, that's corrupt and it's wrong. But you won't be building the shopping centre in a way that means it's going to fall down in 5 years' time and kill everybody inside.
And the thing is, these politicians, they don't provide for the nation, and then, they cut their finger and they're off on their private jets to another country for private healthcare.
Yes.
David Cameron is not going to take £20 million just straight out of the NHS budget and stick it in his Swiss bank account. It's never going to happen.
No.
But that kind of thing goes on or has gone on.
Have you got a personal story, Obi? Have you got something that's happened to you?
Personal story. Well, I mean, my family in Nigeria, and I've been going to Nigeria many times since I was a child, and it's just a way of life. You'll be driving from one town to the next and can't get anywhere unless you pay the police money, give them money for drinks. They'll find something wrong with your car, or they'll just keep you there by the road. It runs from the lowest level up to the highest level. Cannot do anything without.
And what happens if you say no? Well, so if you get stopped in the street, if you're making your way from Lagos to Abuja, and you get stopped on the motorway or the big road, and what do they say? Do they just say, "Give me some money"? Does everybody just know it? It's like a vocabulary of corruption.
Well, they'll just park your car over by the side of the road, and you're not going anywhere. They'll find something wrong with your car, no matter how kind of innocuous it is, or they'll just keep you there all day. You're not moving, and if you're unlucky, you might come across someone who becomes quite aggressive. I mean,
and what if you phoned? This is sort of adventures in James's naivety, really, this hour. So what if I phoned the equivalent of 999 and said, "There's a police officer here bribing me"? Don't laugh at me.
Well, I mean, for you to get a 999 response, it probably means you've got the private mobile number of the police commissioner, and he knows you and your family.
Well, isn't there anyone I can call? Can't I phone? Isn't there a Nigerian Esther Ranson? I'm doing some work on Watchdog at the moment. Can't I phone myself? Isn't there a television programme that's dedicated to breaking this stuff down?
Unless you know people, you can't do anything, really. And that's the sad truth.
How do we end up in a place like that? How does it start, do you think?
What, in Nigeria?
Anywhere.
I don't know. It's just greed, isn't it?
It is just greed.
I don't know. I mean, my parents, the Nigeria that my parents grew up in sounds a much more decent place than it is now. I wonder if it's just oil has just made everyone greedy. That's probably the case.
Oil was bound to arrive at some point, wasn't it? And there is money sloshing around, and everybody.
I think that's probably the undoing of Nigeria.
Everybody wants a bit of it. Although Scotland has a lot of oil, or it did have, in almost the same period of time, actually. And Scotland hasn't become mired in corruption in the way that you describe. So it was doable. But I guess it's also contingent upon how much money was there in the first place. It's like the difference between a sugar rush, if you like, and a slow release. Sebastian is in Erith. Thanks, Obi. Sebastian, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I think I would like to first of all commend the Prime Minister for his statement. If he had used "they are heartlessly corrupt," that would have even served them better. Because these are people, you entrust public funds into their care to make the country to be better, and they use it for their family alone, and they watch other people suffer and die. Go to hospitals in Nigeria. If you don't have money, you won't survive it. And the doctors will watch you die because you don't have money to pay. And these same people, they come out and tell you have free treatment in the hospital in Nigeria. And I very much regret that the woman who told you, if you want to do a passport, you just add a little thing. I'm not sure she's in Nigeria. If she lives in Nigeria, she would have understood what corruption meant or what corruption has done to Nigeria as a country. Now, if that woman is working here, earning her money here, and she pays bills here, is it the same in Nigeria? People who found their family in London, if they are really businessmen, they will go out of business within 1 year because it's very, very expensive.
So I could not succeed in Nigeria, and I couldn't even get medical treatment unless I were corrupt.
You will die if you don't have money to treat yourself.
Could I be a radio presenter and be uncorrupt? Or a journalist? Do you have there must be uncorrupt journalists. What about people like Ken Saro-Wiwa? I mean, there are uncorrupt people in public life in Nigeria.
Yes. The people, they say they are corrupt, they are the honest people. If you are honest in Nigeria, you will find it difficult to live there. Please mark that word I have just said. If you are honest, you cannot live in Nigeria. You will struggle.
What fascinating calls we're having today. I had no idea that there were so many people of Nigerian extraction listening. It's a grim picture that you paint, Sebastian. I'm glad that you found refuge in a country where you can thrive as an honest man. It's 10:42. And this choice of the Prime Minister's word is interesting. Martin in Wood Green picks up on it. If I was going to describe something I was against, James, the adjective I'd most certainly not use is fantastically. Saudi Arabia is fantastically brutal. Australia is fantastically racist. Iraq is fantastically backwards. These are Martin's words. Fantastic surely is used to show joy. Could Cameron admire the corruption and feel his company will agree with this sentiment, James? I don't know, but I would tell you one thing. The Corrupt Perceptions Index, thanks to Ian in Hornchurch, I can tell you this, known as the CPI, published by Transparency International, uses expert assessments. There's 177 countries on it, on a scale of 1 to 100. So 0 is highly corrupt, 100 is highly clean. United Kingdom comes in at about 10th, the 10th least corrupt country in the world with a score of 81. Nigeria comes in 136th with a score of 26. Afghanistan comes in 166th with a score of 11. I'm no fan of David Cameron, but trying to find fault with him speaking the truth in what was supposed to be a private conversation seems to be clutching at straws. And maybe, just maybe, we can admit that in the UK we can be proud of who we are, at least in this area. You sent that 12 minutes ago, Ian. I know I should have read it out at the time because I kind of made that point myself at the back of the last quarter. It is something that we should be proud of, although a bit like, my old line about selling more tickets for the ghost train than the speak your weight machine. You just talk about being proud of Britain. It doesn't actually butter many parsnips unless you're offering people an opportunity to be horrible about others. It's just simple, quiet pride in some British values, like, for example, the fact that Sebastian can come here and live as an honest man with a degree of success in a way that he didn't feel he could in Nigeria. The fact that, all right, we roll out the red carpet for some deeply unsavoury characters, particularly from Putin's kleptocracy, but hand on heart, at street level, the existence that most of us lead, it's a bloody marvellous country to live in, this, and we do well to remember that. Gloria's in Buckhurst Hill. Gloria, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Gloria.
Lovely to talk to you.
Likewise.
I don't even know what to say.
Hang on a minute. Has no one explained the workings of how phone-in radio works? You've got to decide what you're going to say before you ring in.
I have.
Oh,
James.
good.
Don't start on me.
Okay.
I think people are missing the point. The fact that Cameron, it's not so much what he said, but it's the fact that he's such a loose cannon and so arrogant that he feels he can say anything anywhere. That's not the kind of thing you say.
Well, he wouldn't have said it to you and me. He's talking to the Queen. He's fairly confident that she'd keep stum.
He might as well have said it in front of you and me, because notice nobody else responded. They all knew better not to say anything. He was
Didn't the Archbishop of Canterbury say, I think the new fella is really getting it right?
Which is correct.
Yes.
I think he was trying to bring some order back into the whole conversation. This is not so. You say that if you want, when you're talking to 2 or 3 of your friends, you're about to host these people. You must know the cameras around. You must know that even out of proprietary. You just don't say that kind of thing, publicly.
Well, it wasn't public. I mean, to be fair to the Prime Minister, he didn't realise he was being filmed. You can argue he was a... Go on.
That's part of his idiocy.
Well, then you're calling the Queen an idiot as well, and if you are, I shall have to have you executed.
No.
Because she got filmed by... She didn't know she was overheard by the cameras when she was slagging off the Chinese officials. So you can't call the Prime Minister an idiot without calling the Queen an idiot, and if you call the Queen an idiot, I will have you arrested.
Okay, I'll let other people call her an idiot. I won't do that, and I don't think she is. But the point is, you get the point that I'm saying. Cameron he feels he's beyond. He can say to me he's like a milder form of Donald Trump, in the sense that if he had an opportunity, some of the things he's said, in terms of how he even his attitude towards people in Britain, let's look at the cuts that he's making. They are killing people too. It's not on the same level, granted. But trust me, if this man had the opportunity...
But it's not corruption. What you say is questionable. But no, it would only be corruption if they were making cuts that you believe are hurting people and keeping the money for themselves, actually putting it in their pocket.
These people are, they're clever. Some of the people in Nigeria are just not as clever as these people here. If we look closer and deeper, I'm sure you'll find a lot more corruption than is put in the paper.
Do you not think he said fantastically in order to be a bit more diplomatic? I'm turning your point on its head here, or I'm going to try to, because if he'd said disgustingly corrupt, you'd have been more offended than you are by fantastically corrupt.
I think he's a bit more smarter, than that. He wouldn't use disgustingly. And I think that's a bit more of the British,
maybe.
way of talking.
I'm going to make you laugh. Are you Nigerian, Gloria? Do you?
I am.
Right, I'm going to make you laugh now. I'm going to make you laugh because you've got a lovely laugh, and I want to hear it one more time. You ready?
Okay.
This is a tweet to @LBC. It says, "Dear James, my name is Wise. James, if you think Nigeria is corrupt, you haven't been to Uganda." It's 10:47. Naveed is in Wokingham. Naveed, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James.
Hello, mate.
James, I just wanted to point... the reason I called is you asked a question earlier on, and the chap mentioned greed as a reason, as one of the reasons why this happens. And I just wanted to give you another angle on this.
Yes.
My parents are from Pakistan. I lived there for a number of years. I mean, the way it works there, I think it's actually less to do with greed and more to do with expectations and a requirement of the job. People pay, at times, enormous sums they have to borrow to take on the job. And the expectation is they will make that money back through those bribes. And at the lower level, this is how it works, because the seniority of that, I mean, if you go higher up the chain, they expect payment from the people at the ground level. Now, if you look at two institutions in Pakistan that have been incorruptible and are the stabilizing forces there, one is the army, and the second, on a lower level, are the Highway Enforcement Agency. Now, you can try offer them money, and you can then you put up with the results of that. But they are incorruptible, and the reason why that happens is they're looked after, they're paid good money. Now, the money that's supposed to be paid to the police, a lot of it is kept back. They're paid a very menial wage, and they're expected to make up that money through bribes and then passing the rest of it on. So it's built into the system in a way that we don't properly understand, because if anybody was doing anything similar here, it would be both out of the ordinary and entirely greedy. Whereas there, if I understand you correctly, there are jobs in public service that don't actually pay you enough legally to sustain your life. No.
You need to be part of the corruption.
I mean, just to give you an example,
yes,
James,
please.
of someone I know personally related to, they paid the equivalent in pounds, £250,000 to become a customs officer.
How much?
£250,000 to become a customs officer. And this is no lie. They paid an enormous amount to become a customs officer.
To somebody senior in the customs machine?
To get the job.
Yeah, so who gets the money?
Part of that money went to the person that was leaving the job as a part of their payment, and a part of that went to the person that was employing them. And they're expected to then make that money within their job.
Yeah, and they've got to. They've got to take bribes, otherwise they're a quarter of £1 million in the hole from the very beginning of their career.
And therein lies the problem, James. It's an absolute necessity, and And it's less to do with greed. I mean, like the examples I cited of the army and the highway agency and the other rangers as well. They're looked after, they're paid well, their accommodation is taken care of. So there's no need to take bribes. You know, they do their jobs, they're trained well. And within the other sectors, like the bureaucrats there, the police, they're, you know, I mean, my wife had to get her passport. She's from Pakistan. She had to get her passport. She had to pay to get into the right queue. When she got to the person, they said if they wanted a quick service or they're happy to wait. And happy to wait means they could get it from anywhere from now until they're probably 60. So they had to make a payment there. They had to make, I mean, 3 or 4 payments were made before she got right to the end, where they accepted her application and said, right, you know, that will be with you within the next couple of weeks. So it's right throughout the system, James. And like I said, greed is a little bit unfair upon the people.
No, that's a fascinating insight. In fact, this has been one of the most unexpectedly fascinating hours I can remember. I know I've changed my opinion on every single facet of it since the beginning of the hour. You're right, because we're trying to portray these people as greedy, pocket-lining crooks, but actually, under your analysis, the only way they can survive in that system is to be corrupt.
Absolutely. There is no other way. I mean, there is no
And
other
it's
way.
corruption that comes from the top and trickles down. It's not corruption that starts at the bottom and works its way up. I mean, as with any economy, the biggest responsibility for the way things work is going to lie with the people who've got the most.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the biggest ones where the army now has actually made things a hell of a lot better. For instance, in Karachi, they've been cracking down on land grabbers. And when they've been arresting these people, they're finding out the chains go right up to the politicians there. You know, they grab.
Of course they do. Of course. Well, of course they do. And that's how perhaps even, I mean, on a much more serious level, that would perhaps be how someone like Osama bin Laden can hide in the country. Somebody somewhere will know, somebody somewhere will look the other way, somebody somewhere will pocket a lot of money.
Well, this is it. Yeah, I mean, money talks. As long as you've got the money and the right connections, you can more or less get away with anything and do anything you like. I mean,
but is that not true? Is that true here? I mean, that when you put it like that, and I'm not in any way stepping back from the observation that this is yet another example of Britain being a bit brilliant. But here, if you've got the money and the right connections, you can do a hell of a lot more than somebody who's got neither.
No, you can, James. You can. But again, I'm going to give you a personal example of a cousin of mine who ended up in hospital because they were given a whole list of drugs. When that person found out that we know someone quite high up in the hospital, they ripped up that list of drugs and said, right, we need to actually put them in a different ward and give them the correct medicine, if you like. So they're not maintaining the disease, but you know they could have died. People like one of your other callers was quite right in mentioning people die as a result. You know, people die because of this. If you go into a private hospital compared to a government-funded one, I mean, people are.
So all of the things that we see as evidence of injustice are variations on a mostly just system. What you describe is truly black versus white. It's truly yes versus no. It's utterly binary. That you're safe, you will live if you are connected and have some cash. You are unsafe and you will die if you don't. So the Prime Minister was absolutely on the button when he described it as fantastically corrupt. As a few of you have pointed out, it is a word that posh people ordinarily use just as a synonym for very. It's fantastically corrupt. Good grief, what an hour.